I'm Alexander Reyes. Though for the first 32 years of my life, most people just called me Alex, Derek's quieter little sister, the one who didn't say much at family dinners and definitely didn't seem like the type to have ever broken anyone's arm for a living. My brother Derek Reyes is 2 years older than me, the kind of man who peaked in high school and never quite forgave the world for moving on without him. And on the night his birthday party turned into something none of us will ever forget. I was standing in his backyard with my 7-year-old son's small, sweaty hand wrapped around mine, watching a UFC champion walk toward me like I was the punchline to a joke I hadn't been told yet. "Go easy on her," Derek said, loud enough for the whole yard to hear. And everyone laughed. That ugly, easy laugh that comes from people who've decided in advance who the joke is about. My son, Eli, tightened his grip on my hand and looked up at me with those wide, uncertain eyes kids get when they can feel the temperature of a room change before they understand why. "Mommy, are you scared?" he whispered. And the champion, Jonah Cade, the reigning UFC lightweight title holder, a man Derek had apparently paid or begged or bribed his way into flying out for this exact moment, kept walking toward me with the loose, predatory calm of someone who does this professionally, who has never once in his adult life had to wonder if he could hurt someone. Then his eyes dropped to the medal hanging around my neck. Eli had put it there himself an hour earlier, dug out of a shoebox in my closet he wasn't supposed to touch, hanging it over my head like a piece of costume jewelry because he thought it looked cool and he wanted his mom to look tough for the party. I hadn't had the heart to take it off, and I watched Jonah Cade's whole face change, the easy showman smirk sliding right off it as he read the small engraved letters on the back of that medal. He stopped walking. He looked up at me like he was seeing a different person standing in the same shoes. "Wait," he said, quiet enough that only the people closest to us actually heard it. "You're her." To understand how it came to this, how my own brother stood in his own backyard and orchestrated a public humiliation with a professional fighter as the delivery method, you have to go back almost a year to the day everything between Derek and me finally cracked open for good. I'd spent most of my 20s doing something my family never fully understood, and if I'm honest, something I stopped trying to explain to them a long time ago. Before Eli was born, before the quiet suburban life I built afterward, I competed in submission grappling at a level most people never see unless they go looking for it. International tournaments, national team trials, a run through the ADCC circuit that ended with a gold medal I never once hung on a wall. I trained under people whose names mean something in rooms Derek has never been in. I taught seminars to men twice my size who left with a very different understanding of what small and dangerous can mean in the same body. And then I had my son and I stepped away and I let that whole chapter of my life fold quietly into a box in the back of my closet because it had never once made me feel like I belonged in my own family. It had just made me feel further away from them. Derek, meanwhile, had built his entire identity around being the strong one. Not fit, not disciplined, just loud about it. Gym selfies, unsolicited advice about protein intake, a habit of grabbing my wrist at family functions to test my grip like I was a party trick he got to perform whenever he needed an audience. For years, I let him have it. It cost me nothing to let my brother believe he was the tough one in the family, and it kept the peace. And peace had always felt more important to me than being understood. That started to change the day I found out Derek had gone to my job. I coach part-time at a community self-defense program now, mostly for women coming out of dangerous situations, work I care about more than almost anything else I've ever done. And one afternoon, my program director pulled me aside, visibly uncomfortable, and told me my brother had called, not to say something kind, not to brag about me for once, but to warn them, to tell them unprompted that I'd exaggerated my background, that I wasn't really qualified, that he just wanted them to be careful trusting me around vulnerable clients. He'd gone behind my back to the one place where my actual competence was on the line. And he tried to quietly poison it because some small, ugly part of him couldn't stand the idea that I might be respected for something he didn't understand and couldn't do himself. I didn't confront him. I remember sitting in my car outside that building for almost 20 minutes, hands on the wheel, doing the thing I've always done, running the numbers, staying calm, refusing to let the anger become the story. I decided right there that I wasn't going to spend my energy defending a version of myself that had never needed defending in the first place. I was going to let the truth exist quietly on its own terms, and if it ever needed to speak for itself, I'd make sure it could. My younger sister, Mia, found out about the workplace call before I did. Derek had bragged about it to her first, the way he brags about most things, expecting an audience. And Mia, God love her, didn't say anything to defend me. She just laughed it off. Told me later she figured it was probably a misunderstanding because disagreeing with Derek out loud had never once gone smoothly for anyone in our family. Mia had spent her whole life being the family's designated peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over instead of asking hard questions. And it was easier for her to assume I'd overreacted than to consider that our brother might be capable of something petty and cruel. I didn't blame her for it. Not then, but I noticed it. The way you notice a hairline crack in a window, small, easy to ignore until the day something hits it just right. At work, the truth simply corrected itself, the way truth tends to when you stop fighting for it and just let people watch you do the job. My director saw me teach. She saw the women I trained walk taller after 6 weeks than they had the day they arrived. Saw the technique, saw the restraint, saw exactly how much control it takes to be genuinely dangerous and never once need to prove it. Derek's warning evaporated under the weight of actually watching me work. Nobody ever brought it up to me directly again. But I kept it filed away, quiet in the back of my mind, in the place where I keep the things I don't forgive so much as I just remember. I didn't plan revenge. I want to be honest about that because it would be a better story if this were some elaborate scheme I'd been building for months. It wasn't. What I did instead was smaller, and I think more honest. I simply stopped erasing myself for his comfort. I kept my old training logs. I kept the email confirmations from the tournaments, the sanctioning body registrations, the photos from awards ceremonies. I'd never bothered showing my family because I'd never needed them to see it to know it was real. I wasn't building a weapon. I was just refusing to let a version of my life that had actually happened get quietly written out of the record by someone who'd never once asked me a genuine question about it. Derek's birthday party was Mia's idea, technically a big one. Extended family, co-workers, neighbors, the whole performance of him turning 34 like it was a coronation. I almost didn't go. Eli begged me, though, excited about the bounce house and the surprise guest Derek had been hyping up for weeks like it was a state secret. I said yes for my son, the way I say yes to most uncomfortable things now. I didn't know the surprise guest was a UFC champion until I saw the tent with the sponsor banners going up in Derek's backyard that morning. I didn't know the surprise guest was for me until Derek pulled me aside an hour before the party, grinning in that way. He grins when he thinks he's finally won something and said, "I got you a present too, sis. Thought it was about time somebody showed you what actually tough looks like." He said it like a joke. He said it in front of 3 of his friends who all laugh the way people laugh when they've already decided which side they're on before anything's even happened. I remember standing there thinking quietly, almost gently, he still has no idea. Not angry, just tired in the specific way you get tired of explaining yourself to someone who was never actually listening. The party filled up fast. Neighbors, cousins, Derek's co-workers, Mia hovering near the drink table with that anxious peacekeeper energy she always gets at family events. Eli found the box in my closet that morning while I was getting ready, the one I never talk about. And before I could stop him, he draped the medal over my neck, beaming, telling me I looked like a superhero. I let him have that. I didn't expect it to matter. John Kate arrived a little after 2, and the whole backyard rearranged itself around him the way rooms do around famous people. A ripple of phones coming out, Derek practically vibrating with pride at having produced him like a magic trick. Derek gathered a crowd near the patio, made a whole announcement out of it. My sister here thinks she's some kind of tough guy, so I figured we'd let a real one say hello and gestured me forward like I was a volunteer at a magic show. I want to be clear, I hadn't said a single word about being tough. Not that day, not that year. This wasn't a response to anything I'd claimed. It was Derek needing an audience for a cruelty he'd been rehearsing in his head for who knows how long. I walked forward because refusing would have made a bigger scene and because some old calm part of me already knew exactly how this was going to end. Eli walked with me, hand in mine, asking if I was scared. Everyone laughed when Derek said, "Go easy on her," and John Cade closed the distance between us with the easy stride of a man about to do a favor for a friend, right up until his eyes dropped to the metal Eli had hung around my neck, and he stopped mid-stride like he'd walked into glass. "Wait," he said. "You're her." He said it again, louder this time, turning to actually look at my face instead of the joke Derek had set up for him. "You're Reyes. The Reyes. You trained under Halverson. You're the one who taught the guard retention seminar in Denver, the one on the old tape everybody's coach still makes them watch." The backyard had gone very, very quiet. "I built my entire ground game off a technique you demonstrated in a video I watched probably 300 times before I ever had a real coach." "You're not." He looked at Derek now, something sharpening in his expression. "This is who you wanted me to scare." I watched my brother's face do something I'd genuinely never seen it do before. Not anger, not even embarrassment. Exactly, not yet. Just a kind of blank, sputtering confusion, like a man watching a script he'd written get read by an actor who refused to follow it. She never told any of us. He started, and Jonah cut him off. Not unkindly, just factually, the way you correct someone who's about to embarrass themselves further. "That's on you, man, not on her. He said I'm not fighting anyone's little sister for a birthday party. I came here because your invite said family friend wants a photo. I didn't come here to be somebody's prop." He turned back to me, and something in his face shifted from disbelief into something closer to respect. "It's genuinely an honor. I mean that." I felt Eli's hand squeeze mine, and I looked down, and he was grinning up at me like I'd just been crowned something, and for a second the whole backyard didn't matter at all. Mia was the one who broke first out of everyone standing there. She stepped forward out of her usual spot at the edges of things and said loud enough for the whole yard, "Derek, did you seriously fly a UFC champion out here to embarrass her own sister?" It wasn't a question. It was the first time in longer than I could remember that Mia had said something true out loud in front of him instead of smoothing it over. Derek opened his mouth to explain, to spin it, to say it was just a joke, and found for maybe the first time in his adult life that nobody in that yard was particularly interested in helping him land it. I didn't yell at him. I didn't need to, and honestly, some old exhausted part of me had known for months that I wouldn't need to, that this was exactly why I'd never bothered building a case against him, never bothered forcing the truth out into the open myself. The truth had never needed my help. It just needed a moment honest enough to hold it. And Derek, in his desperation to finally win, had built that moment for me himself. "I have to be honest," Jonah said into the silence, looking around at all of us. "This is a little awkward now, but would you want to actually train with me sometime? I'd genuinely love to pick your brain." And just like that, the party's entire center of gravity shifted quietly and permanently away from my brother and toward a version of me that had been sitting in a shoebox in my closet for 6 years, waiting for someone to finally ask the right question. I didn't stay long after that, not out of anger, out of something closer to relief. I hugged Eli, Jonah for his kindness in a way that had nothing to do with the scene Derek had built and everything to do with the respect he'd shown a stranger's son standing next to her. And I drove home early before the cake, before the part of the party where Derek would have to keep existing in the wreckage of his own plan. The months since then have been quieter than I expected, and better than I hoped. Mia calls now, actually calls, not just texts, and she's asked me more genuine questions about my old career in the last few months than my family asked me in the previous 10 years combined. Eli tells people his mom is a guard retention legend, a phrase he definitely does not fully understand, but says with tremendous pride anyway. And I've let that medal hang on a hook by my front door instead of in a box in the closet, because I finally understand that hiding it never protected anyone. It just made it easier for people like Derek to write their own version of who I was. Derek texted me eventually, weeks later, a long message about how he'd been under a lot of pressure and didn't mean it like that, and hoped we could put it behind us. I read it twice. I thought about all the ways I could respond, all the old instincts telling me to make it easy for him to smooth it over the way I always had, the way Mia used to. And then I just didn't. I told him I was glad he was doing some reflecting, that I wasn't interested in relitigating his birthday party, and that I'd see him at holidays if he wanted to keep things civil. No apology tour, no dramatic confrontation. Just a door left open at exactly the width I was comfortable with and not 1 inch wider. My brother spent 30 years building his identity on being the strong one in the room. It turns out he just needed better information about who else was in it. If this one hit home for you, hit like and subscribe. I've got plenty more where this came from, and I'd love to have you back for the next one.